Hello everybody, and welcome to Chapter 1, pertaining to limits, alternatives, and choices, and this is going to be the introductory chapter to our class. We're going to start off going through what is known as the economic perspective, then some theories, principles, and models. What's the difference between micro and macroeconomics? This is mostly a macro-focused course, but I will touch upon things from a micro perspective every now and then. What is the individual's economizing problem, society's economizing problem? What is our production possibilities model? And finally, unemployment, growth, and the future. So economics is a social science concerned with making optimal choices under the conditions of scarcity. In the real world, products and services are scarce. We don't have the ability to make an unlimited amount of things. So as a consequence, we have to determine what are the optimal mix of products and services to fulfill society's needs. And that brings us to our second point here. Economic wants, by rule, exceed society's productive capacity. We have unlimited wants, but not an unlimited amount of resources to achieve all of them. Now, from an economic perspective, this is a viewpoint that envisions individuals and institutions making rational decisions by comparing both marginal benefits and marginal cost. It considers things like scarcity and choice. Once again, products and services we can't make unlimited amounts of, and we have to determine what we're going to make at the expense of others. Opportunity cost, or the situation where if you pursue one alternative, what are you giving up to do this? So if we own a factory and we make computers, cell phones, and tablets, if we decide to make more tablets, the opportunity cost would be the amount of computers and cell phones we're now no longer making that we had to give up to make more tablets. In the real world, both consumers and businesses generally exhibit what is known as purposeful behavior to increase utility. Utility is the concept of what you derive from an economic decision. Utility is what benefit you get from buying a product or a service, or what benefit you get from pursuing a certain choice. And we expect that in an economic sense, businesses and consumers are going to act in their own self-interest and make and purchase the goods and services that they desire. And that will lead us into an analysis where we can compare cost to benefit of products and services. Now, once again, resources are scarce. We don't have an unlimited number of resources, and as a consequence, we must make choices. There is an opportunity cost to everything we do. If we choose to once again make more tablets at expense of computers and phones, that's an opportunity cost. If you choose to go out to dinner to one specific restaurant, if you were torn between two, your opportunity cost is whatever meal or satisfaction you would have gotten from the restaurant you didn't go to. So an opportunity cost is what you give up to pursue a decision. What we mean by there's no free lunch is every decision we make has some form of an opportunity cost. There's always an opportunity cost component to any decision which we make. So what did you give up to be in this class? What would you be doing if you weren't here? That's an opportunity cost right there. And everyone's opportunity cost is going to be different. Opportunity costs differ per person. We all give up different things to pursue decisions, and we all have different wants and needs. But we expect, in an economic sense, that consumers and businesses will act with what is known as rational self-interest. Rational self-interest is the notion that the decisions we make will be in our own interest. We're going to buy goods and services which we want or which we need or help us in some way. We're not going to just purchase things for no reason. And our economic decisions we make will also be in our interest as well. Now the goal of this, once again, is to maximize that notion of utility. Now, generally, it doesn't mean we're completely selfish individuals or we can't be wrong. Economics, and you'll hear me use this many times throughout this class, works great in theory. However, in practice, not as much. People make mistakes, people make wrong decisions. We don't have a crystal ball or anything like that. And we don't always have all of the information pertaining to a decision, so we can certainly be wrong. But in theory, people and companies will act in their own interest and make decisions which benefit them in some way. We generally make decisions to make us better off, not worse off. When firms are rational, they make choices about what products they make to both maximize their profits and also meet the needs of their customers. A business not operating in this way would make goods and services that no one wanted, and obviously they wouldn't stay in business very long. And the desired outcome is whatever you want when you set out to make a decision. We don't arbitrarily make decisions. We make them with some sort of goal or outcome in mind. So that's what we mean by a desired outcome. We make our decisions with some sort of goal or outcome in mind. Now, in economics, we do what is known as a marginal analysis. And a marginal analysis is the comparison of marginal benefits and costs for decision making. And marginal means extra or additional. Marginal costs and benefits are going to appear multiple times in this class. But what we mean is this. We'll continue buying something or pursuing something up until it no longer becomes worth it to us. If you say the phrase, it's not worth it or something's too expensive, what it means is the marginal cost or what you're going to have to spend for that product is less than the benefit you would get from it. So we do this every time we buy a good or a service. We constantly are weighing in our heads the benefits and costs and making decisions accordingly. You wouldn't buy a product that you have to spend money on that's not going to help you or benefit you in some way. And that's what we mean by a marginal analysis. In economics, a lot of times we use the scientific method to base our principles and theories. And the scientific method, as you guys may have encountered in a science class before, is the procedure for the pursuit of knowledge involving the observation of facts and the formulation of testing hypotheses to obtain theories, principles, and laws. So we make observations, we come up with some sort of a hypothesis or a statement that we try to prove, we do some form of test to that hypothesis, and then we can either accept, reject, or modify it. And we can always retest if necessary. So economic theories come from observations and data, and we come up with them accordingly. Now, in most economic theories, we have to make some generalizations. If we're trying to determine the effect of something, oftentimes we use what in Latin is known as ceteris paribus, or other things equal. What that means is factors other than those being considered do not change. So if we want to, let's say, determine the effect of a tax rate change, we're going to just simply modify the tax rate and see what happens. We're not going to tweak anything else. That allows us to make comparisons, and that's what we mean by ceteris paribus. So economic principles are generalizations about behavior, and they're true for the average person. And ceteris paribus is important because it allows us to test the effect of something. And we often use things like charts and graphs in economics. We're going to cover in the next few chapters how to read a lot of these charts and graphs and how they work, and we'll see them at various points throughout the course. Now, this is primarily a macro-focused class, but the difference between macro and microeconomics is the following. Microeconomics is from a narrow or small level. It's the study of individual consumers like you or I, individual companies or the firm, or one individual market, the oil market or the orange juice market or the grain market or something like that. Whereas macroeconomics is the study of the entire economy, so the US or North America or a whole state or a major aggregate of the economy, the entire energy sector, the entire food sector, things like that. Macro is a much larger outlook, whereas micro is more narrowly focused. The theories, however, are quite similar, and if you do take a micro-focused class in the future, a lot of what you learn here will be applicable as well, just in a smaller sense. We also have a difference between two types of economics, positive and normative. Positive economics are statements that are factual and aren't subjective, so hard data those are positive economics. The inflation rate was 8%. That's a positive economic statement. The US GDP grew at 4%. That's a positive statement. And we'll get into what both of those things are later in this class. Whereas normative economics are things that involve value judgments. The economy is doing great or it's doing poorly. Those are normative economics. We might have very different views on what is good or bad, or the economy might be good for one of us but not for the other. Those are normative statements. Normative statements are subjective because people have different opinions of what is desirable or what applies to them, whereas positive statements, once again, are represented with numbers and hard data. No matter what we look at, economics has what is known as an economizing problem. No matter who we look at, be it a company or an individual, there is the notion that people have limited income and unlimited wants. Think of all of the things that you wish you could buy, and then all of the things that you actually can buy at any given time, and that's an example of an economizing problem in a personal sense. So the economizing problem both applies to individuals and society as a whole. Consumers have what is known as a budget line. So do businesses. And that is going to be, of the money you have, your income and your savings and all of that, what can you buy and what can't you? And no matter what you do, there's always going to be trade-offs and opportunity costs. So here's a consumer's budget line. Here's the budget line for an individual. So this one's pretty simplified. But this individual has an income of $120 and they can choose between movies and books. Books cost $10 and movies cost $20. So if we look at the line, and let me just get the highlighter here. If we look at the line, which I'm highlighting underneath, at 6 movies, we can do that. 6 times 20 is 120, or all of our income. Or 12 books, we can do that as well. 12 times 10 is 120. In either case, we have none of the other. The blue line is every possible combination we can do. So we can buy 5 movies and 2 books. We can buy 4 movies and 4 books, and so on and so forth as we move along the line. Anywhere on the line is attainable. Anything, and I'll switch to red, anything in this area here is also attainable. It means you're not using your entire budget. Anything out in blue here is not attainable at all. What that means is we're dealing with an area where we cannot afford those combinations. So that's a simple budget line. Obviously, the choices in real life are much more diverse than simply books and movies, but the logic holds true nonetheless. And this is just a perspective here of income per capita. We'll get into this when we get to the GDP chapter, but it's a measure of standard of living in the country. The entire value of a country's economy divided by its population. And here are just some examples here. Switzerland, about $80,500 as of 2017. The US was slightly under 60,000, so on and so forth. This is what is known as GDP per capita, and we'll get into this later on. We have an entire chapter dedicated to GDP. Now, society contains an economizing problem as well. So an individual's economizing problem is what can you buy and what can you afford? Whereas society has to determine how to use its resources to best meet its needs. So society has 4 kinds of resources. We have land resources, which are natural resources, so trees, forests, mines, lithium mines to power batteries, or metal mines to build cars or anything like that. Those are all land resources. Labor resources are your employees, physical and mental activities which your employees contribute to the production process. Capital is any manufactured goods such as technology or factory equipment or vehicles which aid in production. Buildings and all that stuff are capital goods. And finally, entrepreneurial ability, which we consider distinct from labor. Entrepreneurial ability, or being an entrepreneur, requires the ability to take on a lot of risk. Most new businesses fail, and if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to risk your money and your time and your ability to launch a business, we consider that separate than simple labor, which is working for someone. Because to be an entrepreneur, That is something that's intrinsic. Not everybody has the desire to take on that level of risk, so we consider entrepreneurial ability a separate thing. And entrepreneurs, what do? Well, they employ the other factors of production. They take initiative, make strategic decisions, innovate, and take risk. I'm sure a lot of you can think of the names of many entrepreneurs like Bezos or Elon Musk or something like that. But what do they all have in common? They all had an idea, and they used it and launched a company and took a tremendous amount of risk to do it. Most entrepreneurs by rule are innovative, they make decisions, and they have to take initiative to launch a business or answer a problem that maybe no one's answered yet by making a new type of company or a company that works in a different way. Those are all examples of being an entrepreneur. So in society, we have what is known as the production possibilities model. And this is an economic model that shows different combinations of goods that an economy can produce. Now, some of the assumptions we make here, if we adhere to our ceteris paribus, are employment isn't going to change. We're employing we have what's called full employment. Our resources are fixed, as is our technology. And we're going to look at the split between what are known as consumer and capital goods. And those are the two main types of goods that exist in an economy. Consumer goods are the things that you and I buy on a daily basis. Our cell phone is a consumer good. Our computer in front of us is a consumer good. Our clothing we wear. Those are all consumer goods. Whereas capital goods are goods that businesses purchase to help grow. Factory equipment and vehicles that a business uses and computer equipment that a business uses. Those are all examples. Those are all examples of capital goods. Capital goods drive future economic growth. Look at the curve and bring the curve back up. What do we have? Well, it's not very difficult to move from point A to point B. We're not giving up very many robots to add some pizzas. We're going from no pizzas to 100,000. But to go from point B to point C, now we're giving up a lot more robots. And that's what we mean by increasing opportunity costs. When you decide to switch from one good to another, it's usually pretty easy to add a little more of one. You don't have to give up that much. But the more and more you switch to another type of good, you're going to have to give up more and more. You may run out of employees that are capable of making the other type of good, number one. You may run out of equipment or factories to build the other type of good. So it'll become increasingly more expensive the more you switch from one good to the other. And that's what we mean by the law of increasing opportunity costs and why our PPC curve has a concave shape. So if we look here, marginal benefits to marginal costs, let's take a look. Where the two curves cross is point E, or what is known as equilibrium. And equilibrium is something that's going to appear at many times through the rest of this class. That is where we generally want our economy to be. At the equilibrium point, the marginal benefit and marginal cost of adding one more unit of pizza or robots is going to be the same. In this case, we're looking at pizza. So the equilibrium point is 200,000. At 200,000, it is exactly the same, the cost and benefit of adding one more unit of pizza. As we go beyond that, the amount of cost is going to keep going up, and the benefit to society will be less than the cost. Generally, we will not keep making products when the cost exceeds the benefit. So the economy decides how much pizza to produce, similar to how you or I make a decision. The economy must compare the marginal benefit to the marginal cost of producing pizza. And the optimal amount of pizza is where the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost of producing another unit. And that's what's known as the equilibrium point. That's something we're going to look at quite a bit in the next few chapters. What is going on? Well, what's going on is our entire curve is shifting out. And points that weren't available before, remember anything beyond the curve is not attainable, now are. And this is what is known as economic growth. We have an entire chapter later on in this class focused on economic growth. But economic growth means that your economy can now make more goods and services at all possible combinations because it has grown. And economic growth is the desire of the long-term goal of any well-made or well-run economy. So a higher standard of living means we can now produce more at all of these points than we did before. That's what's known as economic growth. So, capital goods generate more growth in the future than consumer goods. But obviously, we cannot have all of one and not the other. So on the left is an economy making more consumer goods than capital, and it exhibits less growth than the one on the right, which is making more capital goods than consumer. Capital goods drive future growth. Now, what else drives growth? Well, what else drives growth is international trade, and we're going to spend a couple chapters later on focusing purely on trade. But trade allows for specialization. Not every country is capable of making every good and service better than someone else, even if they're large and powerful. So international trade allows countries to specialize in what they do best, and then trade with other countries who are specializing in what they do best. And it allows everybody to get more goods and services than they would have had by making them in-house. So that's what international trade leads to. It leads to growth. And finally, our last slide here, and they use Starbucks, but this applies to any big company. So Starbucks became a massive company using marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis, including ranking and selecting new locations, determining local saturation, and setting their menu. So by using this analysis, they are able to grow and be successful. Obviously, not just Starbucks does this, any large company does, but this kind of analysis is done all the time for any company that is well run. That's going to bring us to the end of Chapter 1, and I'm going to bring up the Chapter 1 appendix slides now.